The moment you stepped outside this morning, the birds in your yard started talking about you, not to you, about you. To each other, and to every other bird within earshot, which on a quiet morning can mean every bird within several hundred feet in every direction. Before you reached the feeder, before you poured the coffee, before you'd fully decided whether to stay outside or go back in, the conversation had already started. And it wasn't vague. It wasn't general. It was specific to you. Your face, your movement, your history in that yard passed through calls and postures and silences that most people spend their entire lives standing inside without ever once hearing for what they are. Most people assume birds don't really notice them. They scatter when you approach, they come when you fill the feeder, and somewhere in between you've convinced yourself you're just furniture to them. A large warm shape that occasionally brings sunflower seeds. But the reality is far more deliberate, far more specific, and far stranger than that. The birds in your yard have a working profile on you. They've been building it for months, and they share it, constantly, fluently, in a language running parallel to everything you hear when you step outside. Welcome to the hidden mind of birds. Today we're going inside that language, the specific calls, postures and signals birds use not just with each other, but about you. Some of it will feel like a compliment, some of it will feel like being watched. All of it is true. Stay until the end, because the final thing we cover is the one that most people walk through every day of their lives without ever recognizing it. And once you understand what you've been hearing, you will never step outside the same way again. The first thing, the alarm calibration. You've heard a bird's alarm call before. That sharp, repeated chip, or the sudden eruption of a flock lifting off a lawn the moment you take a step. You've probably thought it was about you. And sometimes it is. But here's what most people don't know. Birds don't have a single alarm call for danger. They have a vocabulary, and within that vocabulary, there is a specific register they use for humans, and within that, they vary based on whether the human is known or unknown. Research published in the journal Behavioral Ecology confirmed what field naturalists had long suspected. Birds categorize threats by type, distance and urgency, and they encode all three into distinct call structures. The American robin is one of the clearest examples in a backyard setting. When a neighborhood cat crosses the yard, a predator that moves unpredictably, the robin delivers a rapid high-pitched alarm that sends every bird in the area into the canopy. When a neighbor's dog trots past, a known, predictable non-predator, the call is shorter, quieter, less insistent. When you walk out the back door, a figure the robin has catalogued across dozens of mornings, the call may not come at all, or it might. And that difference is the thing worth paying attention to. If the robin sounds off when you emerge, you're still in the undecided column. If it doesn't, and simply watches you from the holly bush while continuing to forage, you've cleared a threshold. The bird has filed you under known, non-threatening. The other birds in your yard, the white-throated sparrows scratching through the leaf litter, the chickadees in the ornamental crabapple, they hear that robin's silence and they draw their own conclusions. The absence of the alarm call is the language. The birds in your yard are not just reacting to you, they are reporting on you. The second thing, the contact call adjustment. There is a sound your backyard birds make that you probably register as background noise. A soft, repeated chip, a thin high note floated out from a shrub. The faint twitter of a bird you can't quite locate. These are contact calls, the low-level, ongoing acoustic thread birds use to stay connected to each other throughout the day. And according to research from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, birds modulate the frequency and content of those contact calls depending on who and what is nearby. When familiar humans are present in the yard, some species reduce the urgency of contact calls, while others actually increase their frequency. The black-capped chickadee does something particularly telling. In the presence of a known, habituated human, chickadees near that person tend to maintain higher rates of normal social calls while suppressing the sharp, high-frequency alarm notes they reserve for predators. What this means, translated out of birdsong and into something you can hold, the flock has registered your presence and decided the mood doesn't have to change. Pay attention to this one because most people miss it entirely. When you walk into a yard that goes quiet and tight, birds freezing, contact calls stopping, a sudden held breath stillness, that is not neutral. That is an assessment still in progress. You are unclassified. The birds are waiting to determine what category of thing you are. When you walk into a yard and the contact calls continue, the soft chips, the flickering notes passing through the shrubs, you have been filed. The conversation about you happened months ago. You passed. And now the birds simply work around you the way they work around a familiar tree or a fence post they've used for years. There is something quietly profound in that. The yard is not pausing for you, it includes you. The third thing, the sentinel positioning. Stand at your kitchen window and watch what happens when a blue jay lands in your yard right before you go outside, or right after. If you've spent time in that yard, you may notice something that looks almost like staging. The jay lands on an elevated perch, a fence post, a high branch, the peak of a shepherd's hook, and orients itself, watches, then calls. Blue jays are recognized throughout North American bird behavior research as sentinel species. They position themselves at elevated vantage points not randomly, but in direct response to perceived changes in their environment, and humans entering a yard register as a significant change. Research from the University of Florida and subsequent field studies documented that blue jays are capable of tracking individual humans across repeated interactions and adjusting their sentinel behavior accordingly. With unfamiliar humans, sentinel positioning is longer, more vocally active, and draws more species responses from nearby birds. With known individuals, positioning may be brief or may not happen at all. But here is the piece that changes the way you think about this. When the jay positions itself and calls while you are in the yard, it is not just sounding an alarm for the flock. It is broadcasting your presence to every bird within range, and because the jay call carries so far and cuts through so many other sounds, that range can extend well beyond your property line. You are, in a real sense, being announced to the neighborhood. Every time. The next time, a blue jay lands somewhere elevated when you step outside and throws out a few sharp calls before settling. That is not a coincidence. That is a species that has been tracking large animals across open landscapes for millions of years, doing exactly what it evolved to do. And you are the large animal in question. The fourth thing, the recognition approach. Stay with me here, because this one requires a bit of setup, but the payoff is worth it. There is a difference between a bird that comes to your feeder and a bird that comes to you. Most backyard visitors are feeder trained, not human trained. They've learned that a particular location produces food, and they return to that location. They would do the same if you were replaced by a cardboard cutout. But some individuals, and this is specific to individuals, not species, develop something researchers at Cambridge and the Max Planck Institute for Ornithology have described as person recognition, the ability to distinguish a specific human from others and to orient behavior toward that person differently. It has been most rigorously documented in corvids, crows and jays, but there is compelling field evidence that it exists in other backyard species as well. Chickadees that are hand-fed over a season begin to approach the hand feeder before the food is visible, tracking the person's location in the yard rather than the location of the feeder. In documented cases of hand taming, which researchers at Cornell have observed in multiple species, birds begin to approach the known human from greater distances, at higher speeds, with lower alarm posture than they use for any other human who enters the same space. What this means for your yard is this: if a bird in your yard responds to you differently than it responds to other people who enter the same space, if it comes closer when you're outside than when your neighbour is, or if it moves toward you when you sit still, it is not a coincidence, and it is not projection. That bird has a category in its cognitive map that is specifically and only you. You are not just a human to that bird. You are a person. The fifth thing, and the one that is hardest to hear, the mobbing consensus. You've seen mobbing. A crow or a jay harassing a hawk. A group of small birds is swarming an owl. Loud, chaotic, insistent. You've probably thought of it as predator behavior, birds driving away something dangerous. And that is accurate. But mobbing is also a teaching system. And it is not just for predators. Research published in Animal Cognition by Dr. John Martzloff at the University of Washington documented that American crows not only recognize individual human faces, but also pass that recognition through their social networks. Crows that had been trapped and banded by researchers wearing specific masks later mobbed humans wearing those same masks, even researchers who had never personally participated in the trapping. The information had been shared. The social network had been updated. What this means for your backyard is not alarming. Most of us have not trapped and banded the crows in our neighbourhoods. But it means something worth sitting with quietly. The corvids in your yard, the crows, the jays, possibly the magpies if you have them, are maintaining a distributed social memory about the humans in their territory. If you have been kind to them, if you've put out peanuts, if you've moved slowly, if you've never startled them, that information is in the network. The crows 2 streets over may already have a tentative assessment of you, built from the reports of birds you've never directly interacted with. And if someone in your neighbourhood has been unkind to crows, has thrown something, has chased them, that information is in the network too. The social map is updated continuously, passed through contact, call and observation. You are living in a yard that is always in conversation about the predators, about the weather, about the food sources, and about you. The language runs all the time, at the edge of what you can hear and sometimes well beyond it, and you are one of its subjects. Think about the moment you stepped outside this morning. The bird at the feeder, that robin, that chickadee, that jay on the fence post. You thought you were just going outside, but the yard had already been briefed. The absence or presence of alarm calls, the contact calls continuing or pausing, the sentinel positioning or the lack of it, all of it was real information moving between real minds about you specifically. You were not invisible. You were never invisible. What changes when you understand this is the nature of the quiet. The mornings when you walk out and the yard simply continues, birds foraging, calling softly, moving between the shrubs without scattering, that is not indifference. That is the deepest form of acceptance a wild creature offers. It is a yard that has decided you are safe. That has encoded you not as a threat, but as a known presence, a familiar part of the landscape, a large animal that lives here too. The birds in your yard have a file on you. They've been adding to it for as long as you've been living near them. And somewhere in that file, if you've been patient, if you've moved quietly, if you've filled the feeder on the same mornings for long enough, somewhere in that file, there is a note that says, "This one is all right." Tell me in the comments, have you ever noticed a specific bird in your yard that seems to recognise you personally? A crow, a chickadee, a jay that behaves differently with you than with anyone else? I want to hear the story. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.